Probably the first Boogie Woogies ever played were in a logging camp barrel house in the piney woods near Marshall. Several factors caused Boogie Woogie music to arise here in the 1870s, including the abrupt arrival of the railroad displacing steamboats and a large population of newly emancipated African Americans working in logging camps connected to the railroads. All the elements known to be essential to the emergence of Boogie Woogie music were found only in the Marshall, Texas area at this time. The first railroad in northeast Texas began at Swanson's Landing on Caddo Lake and ran 22 miles to Marshall. The locomotive and tracks were brought to Caddo Lake by steamboats from New Orleans. Following the Civil War, the Texas and Pacific Railway Company began expanding the rail lines from Marshall. Workers laid railroad spur lines deep into the forest. Steam locomotives chugged in and out of the camps, hauling logs, and the sounds of the chuffing locomotives rattling along the iron rails helped to create a new music. The famed Library of Congress oral historian Alan Lomax said, "Anonymous black musicians incorporated the rhythms of the steam locomotive and the moan of their whistles into the new dance music they were playing in jukes and dance halls. Boogie Woogie forever changed piano playing as ham-handed black piano players transformed the instrument into a polyrhythmic railroad train." The music and dancing in the barrel houses soon found its way to Marshall, which was the headquarters of the Transcontinental Texas and Pacific Railway. As Boogie Woogie music arose, the railroad expanded out of the Marshall area, and riding the rails, Boogie Woogie would eventually spread throughout the United States. Brothers George and Herschel Thomas were the first to use musical notation of Boogie Woogie bass lines in sheet music. They rode trains through Marshall several times before moving from Houston to New Orleans. The Fives and another Thomas composition, The Rocks, became the litmus test for piano players. According to one old-time player, if you didn't know the Fives and the Rocks, you'd best not even sit on the piano stool. The names old-time piano players used to identify left-hand bass lines were based on places served by the original T&P routes. Not surprisingly, the most primitive and probably earliest of these figures was called the Marshall. Hootie Leadbelly Ledbetter was born in 1888 near the south shoreline of Caddo Lake along the Texas and Louisiana state line. The man who grew up within walking distance of Swanson's Landing, where the first locomotive in northeast Texas arrived by steamboat, spent much of his early years in Marshall and Shreveport. Leadbelly achieved worldwide fame with Goodnight Irene, Midnight Special, Old Cotton Fields Back Home, In the Pines, Skip to My Lou, and other iconic songs he created or rearranged. He said he first heard Boogie Woogie around Caddo in 1899. He also told how old-time Boogie Woogie piano players influenced his unique style of guitar playing. He played that Boogie Woogie. That's what I wanted to play on guitar, that piano bass. I always wanted to play piano tunes. I got it out of the barrel houses on Fannin Street. Although by no means the first to play, write, publish, or record Boogie Woogie, Clarence Pinetop Smith was the first to write and record a song that used the words Boogie Woogie in the title. Pinetop's Boogie Woogie remains a favorite today. By the late 1930s, Boogie Woogie music was out of the red light districts and into the mainstream. Outstanding players such as Albert Ammons, Meade Lex Lewis, and Pete Johnson developed national reputations. In 1936, Albert Ammons' Rhythm Kings released the genre's first million-seller, Swanee River Boogie. In 1938, Boogie Woogie master Albert Ammons teamed up with the guitar-playing queen of gospel, Sister Rosetta Tharpe. Their performances at the legendary From Spirituals to Swing concerts at Carnegie Hall are believed by many to be the earliest recorded examples of rock and roll. The big band era of the 1940s brought Boogie Woogie further into the national spotlight. And when American soldiers deployed for World War II, the music that was born in the Marshall, Texas area found its way around the world. Boogie Woogie music has influenced almost all modern musical genres, including jazz, gospel, blues, classical, and country. Country? Yep, the first country single to sell more than 1 million copies was a guitar instrumental called Guitar Boogie by Arthur Smith. Classical? Texarkana native Conlon Nancarrow has been recognized as one of the greatest composers of the 20th century. Because his works were so complex, few performers had the technical ability to master them, so Nancarrow composed classical keyboard works for the player piano. He obtained a custom-made manual punching machine to prepare his rolls and modified pianos to produce complex rhythmic patterns at a speed far faster than human hands. In 1982, Nancarrow was one of the first recipients of a MacArthur Foundation Genius Award. His fame and reputation continued to spread after his death in 1997. Boogie Woogie is also the father of rock and roll. Chuck Berry said, "Call it what you may, jive, jazz, jump, swing, it's still Boogie Woogie so far as I'm connected with it. Everything I play is Boogie Woogie. Rock and roll is just up-tempo Boogie Woogie," said Little Richard. And the Killer, Jerry Lee Lewis, said, "They called it blues, they called it Boogie Woogie, then they changed the name of it to rock and roll." Two musicians born and raised in the birthplace of Boogie Woogie area achieved worldwide recognition as great artists. Floyd Dixon, whose classic hits Wine, Wine, Wine and Hey Bartender were jukebox favorites for decades, was born and raised in Marshall and remained close to family and friends here all his life. Dixon even wrote and recorded songs about his hometown with his Doing the Town Blues, and Marshall, Texas is my home. David Alexander Elam was born in Shreveport, Louisiana, but while he was still an infant, his family returned to Marshall. His father, Tom Elam, worked as a mule skinner in logging camps and played boogie woogie guitar and piano. David was named after Tom Elam's good friend, a well-known Shreveport boogie woogie piano man, David Alexander, who performed as Black Ivory King. In 1955, David moved to the Bay Area and was soon performing as Dave Alexander. He was a self-taught pianist with a fierce determination to master the instrument that he prized above all others. In 1969, Dave became a popular fixture at the legendary Minnie's Can-Do Club on Fillmore Street in San Francisco. It was there that he was discovered and signed by the preeminent rock and roll promoter Bill Graham. Under Graham's management, he opened major concerts for such luminaries as Bob Dylan, the Rolling Stones, Bo Diddley, and many others. In the 1970s, Dave changed his name to Omar Sheriff. Health problems and Graham's tragic death in a helicopter crash took him from the limelight. In 2010, when Dr. John Tennyson discovered that Dave Alexander was still alive and living in Sacramento as Omar Sheriff, one of the blues and boogie woogie's greatest artists had virtually disappeared from the scene. Omar Sheriff returned to his old hometown for the first time in 55 years to headline a boogie woogie homecoming concert. Omar returned again to share the stage with international stars Celia and Baldori for a Christmas concert. And in February 2011, Omar Sheriff accepted the city's invitation to relocate to Marshall as artist in residence. He spent the last year of his life in relative comfort, receiving excellent medical care and enjoying the affection and respect he richly deserved. On August 30th, 2012, Dave Alexander Omar Sheriff was posthumously inducted into the Blues Hall of Fame as a master blues artist. The music that was born near Marshall, Texas, and made its way around the world had finally come home again.